Shampoo wasn't just a satirical comedy about a womanizing hairdresser, it was a razor-sharp scalpel slicing open the shiny surfaces of Beverly Hills vanity, politics, and desire. Behind the glossy images, chaos simmered. Director Hal Ashby clashed with Columbia Pictures. Warren Beatty pushed his luck as star and producer. The actors carried real heartbreak onto the set, and accidents nearly derailed the entire film. Today, we're pulling back the curtain with 20 weird facts about Shampoo, plus one shocking bonus fact that will completely change how you see the film. Let's dive in. Fact 20. It wasn't just a movie of its moment, it was a turning point in American cinema. By the mid-1970s, New Hollywood was already challenging the old guard. Shampoo pushed the movement further by blending political satire, sexual comedy, and social critique into one package. Younger audiences embraced it as truth-telling cinema, while older ones squirmed. The film proved that risky material could be commercially viable if packaged with star power and wit. What audiences don't know, without Shampoo's success, Hal Ashby might not have been trusted with later projects like Bound for Glory or Being There. And Beatty? This film paved the way for Reds, his ambitious political epic. It wasn't disposable satire, it was a cultural shift that altered careers, studios, and the appetite of audiences. In its laughter and heartbreak, Shampoo cracked Hollywood's surface, and the cracks are still visible today. Fact 19. It wasn't just a hit. It was a box office earthquake that blindsided critics. Most insiders predicted Shampoo would perform modestly, given its satirical edge and risque subject matter. But audiences flooded theaters, making it one of the top-grossing films of 1975. The film earned over $60 million domestically, a staggering number for the time. Beatty, who had fought Columbia tooth and nail for wide release, was vindicated. Critics were divided. Some praised it as genius social satire, others dismissed it as shallow fluff. But the numbers didn't lie. What audiences don't know, the success terrified Columbia. Executives hadn't believed in the project, and now they were scrambling to reframe it as a studio triumph. Beatty knew the truth. It was his gamble, his star power, his persistence. It wasn't a lucky accident. It was a calculated risk that detonated at the box office, redefining what a political satire could achieve. Fact 18. It wasn't just shocking for its time, it was nearly banned in several markets. Though tame by today's standards, Shampoo's frank discussions of infidelity, politics, and sexuality rattled conservative audiences in 1975. The Catholic Legion of Decency considered condemning it, which would have crippled its box office. Television promos had to be censored, cutting words like affair and sleeping around. Overseas, some theaters refused to show it unless edits were made, removing key bedroom scenes. Columbia debated releasing a toned-down cut to appease censors, but Beatty resisted. He gambled that controversy would fuel ticket sales, and he was right. What audiences don't know, the film's reputation as filthy satire only boosted attendance. The very threat of being banned turned Shampoo into must-see cinema. It wasn't polite entertainment, it was scandal marketed as spectacle, and in an era still clinging to old Hollywood morality, that made it explosive. Fact 17. It wasn't just a comedy, it was Hal Ashby's secret rebellion against Hollywood's hypocrisy. Ashby, known for films like Harold and Maude and Coming Home, despised the Hollywood system that demanded polished, market-friendly pictures. With Shampoo, he hid rebellion in plain sight. He stretched scenes past traditional pacing, allowed silences to linger, and used overlapping dialogue to mimic chaos. Executives begged him to tighten the movie. He ignored them. His editing room became a bunker where he fought for imperfection. What audiences don't know, Ashby once said privately, "If this movie feels smooth, I've failed." He wanted audiences to feel discomfort, to sense that beneath the glamour was rot. The pacing, the awkwardness, the unresolved tension, these were weapons against Hollywood artifice. It wasn't incompetence, It was rebellion disguised as style, and it made Shampoo one of the rare studio films that feels alive, jagged, and uncontainable, even decades later. Fact 16. It wasn't just Hollywood satire, it was a dangerous mirror for Warren Beatty himself. The character of George wasn't entirely fiction. Beatty admitted that George reflected his own reputation as a womanizer in Hollywood. Friends joked the role was too close for comfort. The public already viewed him as a notorious ladies' man, and this film cemented that image. But here's the kicker. Beatty's personal life made some actresses hesitant to work with him, fearing the blurred line between character and reality. Ashby encouraged Beatty to lean into the discomfort, letting George's selfishness bleed into his charm. What audiences don't know, Beatty nearly cut certain scenes because he felt too exposed, afraid audiences would confuse George with himself. Ashby refused, telling him, "If you're scared, it means it's working." It wasn't just acting. It was self-exposure, peeling back Hollywood's golden boy mask to reveal something both magnetic and unsettling. Fact 15. It wasn't just an ending. It was a heartbreak deliberately engineered to wound. The film closes with George failing to win back Jackie. It's unresolved, painful, and haunting. But here's the twist. Multiple alternate endings existed. In 1. George convinces Jackie to stay, delivering a conventional romantic finale. In another, he's shown spiraling into despair, drinking alone in a half-empty salon. Ashby and Beatty debated furiously. Beatty wanted ambiguity, Ashby wanted tragedy. After weeks of test screenings, they settled on the version we know, Jackie leaving, George stranded in uncertainty. What audiences don't know, Beatty believed a happy ending would destroy the film's integrity, reducing it to fluff. Ashby believed absolute despair would alienate audiences. Their compromise was a razor's edge, sad enough to sting, open-ended enough to haunt. It wasn't indecision, it was strategy, engineered heartbreak designed to echo long after the credits rolled. Fact 14. It wasn't simply a 70s satire, it was a time capsule of American panic. Shampoo was set on Election Day 1968, the night Nixon won the presidency, but it premiered in 1975 after Watergate. That 7-year gap changed everything. Audiences watching in '75 didn't just see a satire about vanity and sex, they saw a haunting premonition of corruption. Ashby leaned into it, loading the soundtrack with period-perfect music and cutting scenes to echo Nixon's looming shadow. One critic wrote, "It plays like prophecy." What audiences don't know, this wasn't accidental. Town and Beatty deliberately chose the '68 setting to amplify irony, but they couldn't predict how perfectly history would align. By 1975, the movie's political satire landed with double the weight. It wasn't just Hollywood gossip, it was a cultural diagnosis, warning of rot that had already consumed the White House. Timing transformed it from comedy to prophecy, leaving audiences stunned. Fact 13. It wasn't light-hearted romance, it was a war zone of fragile egos. Goldie Hawn, Julie Christie, and Jill Clayburgh, 3 brilliant actresses, found themselves orbiting Beatty's gravitational pull. Each had their own career stakes tied to the film, and the competitive tension was fierce. Crew members recall whispered conversations, icy glances, and sudden eruptions during rehearsals. At one point, Hawn reportedly stormed off set after feeling her role was being minimized in favor of Christie. Ashby coaxed her back, reminding her that the ensemble balance was crucial. Beatty played mediator in public, but stoked rivalries in private, believing it sharpened performances. What audiences don't know, the film's authentic jealousy and longing weren't just scripted, they were lived. The fractures among the women mirrored their characters, fueling a dangerous authenticity. It wasn't harmony. It was rivalry weaponized, and Ashby let it smolder until the cameras captured something too raw to fake. Fact 12. It wasn't a smooth shoot. It was sabotage in slow motion. Columbia Pictures executives grew uneasy with Hal Ashby's directing style. He was notorious for working slowly, shooting endless takes, and refusing to stick to call sheets. Executives tried to insert studio representatives on set to keep things on schedule. Ashby rebelled. He locked them out, literally ordering security to bar their entry. Beatty backed him, threatening to walk if Columbia interfered. For weeks, the set turned into a power struggle, the studio desperate to enforce order, Ashby determined to protect his chaotic process. What audiences don't know, the movie teetered on collapse not from artistic failure, but from corporate pressure. In the end, Beatty's box office clout shielded Ashby just enough to finish. The irony? That unruly, free-flowing chaos was exactly what gave Shampoo its living, breathing energy. It wasn't polished studio product. It was rebellion bottled on celluloid. Fact 11. It wasn't just about hair, it was about control, and Beatty was obsessed with every strand. Warren Beatty, a perfectionist, insisted that every haircut in the film be authentic. He perfectly cast, right down to the shine. He even spent weeks apprenticing in a real salon, learning how to hold scissors and wield a blow-dryer with authenticity. He obsessed over the details, from George's slightly too tight pants to his perpetually messy hair. What audiences don't know, this wasn't just dedication. It was Beatty's way of asserting control over every frame, every visual cue. He was co-writer, producer, and star, but his obsession extended to the most granular elements. It wasn't just acting, it was a masterclass in micromanagement, and it's why George feels so undeniably real, even when he's at his most ridiculously charming. Fact 10. It wasn't just a film, it was a cultural grenade that terrified its own studio. Columbia Pictures executives were horrified by the rough cut. They feared its biting satire of sex and politics would alienate mainstream audiences. Some argued it should be shelved. Beatty fought back, demanding a wide release. His gamble worked. Shampoo became one of 1975's biggest hits. What audiences don't know, the laughter and acclaim only came later. At first, Columbia saw danger, not opportunity. Here's the kicker. Without Beatty's defiance, Shampoo might have been buried. Instead, it detonated at the box office. Fact 9. It wasn't seamless editing. It was a nightmare that nearly broke Ashby. Ashby worked through mountains of footage, each scene shot in multiple versions thanks to rewrites and improvisations. Beatty sat in the editing room daily, often clashing with Ashby over which takes to keep. At one point, there were 6 different endings assembled. One had George ending up with Jackie. Another left him entirely alone. The final version, a quiet, unresolved heartbreak, was a compromise forged through exhaustion. What audiences don't know, the ambiguity that defines Shampoo's ending wasn't a grand artistic plan. It was the only middle ground left after battles nearly tore the film apart. Fact 8. It wasn't a clean script. It was a battlefield of rewrites. Robert Towne envisioned Shampoo as a dark critique of capitalism and moral collapse. Beatty pushed for more comedy to broaden appeal. The clash was constant. Scenes were rewritten daily, lines improvised, then discarded. Ashby became mediator, navigating endless disputes. Crew members recalled shooting different movies every morning. What audiences don't know, the tonal whiplash wasn't an accident. It was carved out of conflict. The blend of satire, tragedy, and comedy was born from war between Beatty's charm and Towne's cynicism. That war gave the film its jagged brilliance. Fact 7. It wasn't smooth casting. It was a tug-of-war with Hollywood egos. Jack Nicholson was first approached to play George, but declined. Columbia executives then pushed for Ryan O'Neal, hot off Love Story, to guarantee box office appeal. Beatty, both producer and actor, refused to budge. He threatened to walk if he didn't play George. Ashby sided with him. Without Warren, there is no Shampoo. What audiences don't know, Beatty wasn't just protecting his ego. George was his mirror, Hollywood's ultimate womanizer playing a Hollywood hairdresser. Without Beatty, the role would have lost its sting. It wasn't casting convenience. It was identity, power, and image wrapped into one. Fact 6. It wasn't effortless chemistry. It was real heartbreak bleeding into the film. By 1975, Beatty was tangled in real relationships with both Julie Christie and Goldie Hawn. The love triangle on screen mirrored the one off it. Christie, Beatty's longtime partner, faced the pain of playing scenes with Hawn, who had become Beatty's new obsession. Crew members recalled icy silences at meals, followed by sudden bursts of warmth once cameras rolled. Ashby admitted privately that the tension gave the film its strange electricity. What audiences don't know, the aching glances, the brittle smiles, the tension, it wasn't just performance. It was their real lives bleeding onto film. What audiences see as satire of romance was in fact a snapshot of a painful love triangle that haunted everyone on set. Fact 5. It wasn't scripted snark, it was a grenade of truth smuggled into dialogue. During a heated scene, Lee Grant, as the wealthy Julie, snapped, "I'm not your problem." The line cut like glass, but it wasn't in town script. Grant improvised it, feeling the moment lacked bite. Beatty broke character laughing, but Ashby loved the sting. In editing, Columbia executives wanted it removed, fearing it sounded too modern and harsh. Ashby refused, insisting it gave Julie dimension. What audiences don't know, those 6 words nearly vanished. Instead, they reshaped her character, turning Julie from a shallow socialite into a wounded realist. Improvised in a spark of frustration, it became one of the film's sharpest truths. Fact 4. It wasn't glamour. It was near disaster. The hillside traffic sequence looks effortless, but on set, it nearly killed someone. A vintage convertible veered off the slope when its rigging failed. The stunt driver was thrown partly out of his seat as the car fishtailed toward a cliff. Crew members screamed. Beatty yelled for a stop. But Ashby kept the cameras rolling. They captured raw panic, the skid, the gasps, the chaos. Parts of that footage remain in the final cut. What audiences don't know, every time you watch that shot, you're seeing real danger, not choreography. It wasn't an illusion of risk. It was lived terror, frozen into film. That's the invisible edge that gives Shampoo's satire its strange, unsettling bite. Fact 3. It wasn't just satire. It was political dynamite waiting to explode. Robert Towne's original script for the political rally scene directly mocked Richard Nixon. Beatty rehearsed venomous lines aimed squarely at corruption and hypocrisy. Columbia's lawyers panicked. They feared lawsuits and backlash. Hours before shooting, the call sheet was rewritten to replace Nixon with a generic candidate. What audiences don't know, 2 versions of the scene exist, one cutting, one softened. The unreleased cut, buried in archives, is harsher, angrier, and far more dangerous. Only a handful of insiders have seen it. The final cut remains sharp, but less risky. For audiences in 1975, the satire still stung. But the hidden Nixon version would have been explosive. Shampoo wasn't just comedy. It was Hollywood's veiled rebellion against power. Fact 2. It wasn't staged melodrama. It was raw, uncontainable emotion bleeding onto celluloid. In one of the film's most heated confrontations, Jill Clayburgh faced Goldie Hawn with tears in her eyes. Off camera, Clayburgh was running a dangerous fever. She begged to postpone, but Ashby insisted the fragility would heighten the scene. Hawn, exhausted from back-to-back work, could barely stand. When Clayburgh broke down on camera, her tears weren't acting. They were illness and frustration erupting at once. The set froze, caught between sympathy and awe. When the take ended, Hawn collapsed into a chair while Clayburgh was rushed to her trailer. Studio memos later described the footage as too intense, but Ashby insisted it remain. What audiences don't know, those wrenching tears weren't scripted. They were survival. Preserved forever in celluloid, they turned one scene into an unflinching record of human fragility. Fact 1. It isn't just a romantic comedy. It's a daring portrait of ambition on the edge of collapse. During the Beverly Hills pool party sequence, the set turned into a pressure cooker. The California heat scorched the crew, lights fried equipment, and cameras overheated. At one point, the generator threatened to shut down mid-shoot. Warren Beatty, notorious for improvisation, muttered, "I'm not for sale, but I'm not above negotiation." The crew laughed, but Columbia executives panicked. They worried the line would derail the film's satirical tone. Director Hal Ashby fought to keep it, but Beatty promised restraint. That one throwaway improvisation haunted the editing room. What audiences don't know, this unscripted line nearly derailed production, reminding everyone how fragile the balance was between controlled satire and chaos. On screen it looks polished, but behind the camera, the tension was unbearable. Closing reflection. Shampoo wasn't just a glossy satire, it was a battlefield of egos, heartbreaks, and risks. Behind every laugh was a fight. Behind every polished scene was chaos. That's why it still stings. It wasn't illusion. It was truth disguised as comedy. So if you enjoyed uncovering the chaos, scandals, and secrets of 1970s Hollywood, subscribe and tell us which fact shocked you the most.